All right, let's get things going. So I am honored to introduce our second keynote of the day. Mr. Mike Corsetto has been involved in FIRST since 2001 in many forums as a FIRST alumni and now the head coach of Team 1678, Citrus Circuits. 10 years on Einstein, many banners, hundreds of kids through the program, great student leadership program, and a lot of really great insights into how to build really great sustainable organizations. So I won't go too deep into it. I feel like I could talk forever. Mike was my boss when I was out in California at AFT, and we had some really great times together. So I'm excited to learn more, and I always love watching and hearing what he has to say. I've learned a lot from him in the past. So give it up for Mike Corsetto, everybody.
Awesome. Well, I have a couple of business items before we get going. First, I want to thank the organizers for letting me do this. I've never keynoted anything before, so this is a first for me, and I feel very fortunate to be here with everyone. And also, all the presentations so far have been amazing, and I think it's cool because a lot of our presentations are kind of dipping into each other a little bit, but it just kind of goes to show how much great information there is out there and how many people here are doing really cool things in their own programs in their regions. And lastly, for everybody here, I feel very fortunate to be out here coming out from California for this event. And I love meeting people. My wife rolls her eyes, but I'm like a total extrovert. So if we haven't met yet, I'd love to meet you. So please come up and say hi, either during the rest of the conference or during the barbecue. It'd be great to meet you. Okay, and lastly, I've game planned all this out. I swear it won't take more than 10 seconds, but I'd love to get a selfie really quick. So I'm gonna go right over there and let's take a selfie because I've never keynoted anything before and I want to capture the moment. So, one second. Awesome, thank you. Awesome. Had to do it. And then lastly, we're going to be going through a number of slides here. I'm going to actually set a timer for myself right now because I want to make sure there's time for at least a couple of questions. So save them for the end, but please, if you have a question, write it down. Maybe I'll get to it through the presentation, but if I don't, I'd love to hear from you. So great, let's get rolling on effective student leadership development. Brief introduction. Dave, thank you for the very kind intro. I am the head coach for Citrus. Professionally, I'm the director of hardware and systems engineering. I work with a lot of great people. I've been at FRC since 2004. I was a student and now started coaching 1678 when I went to UC Davis. And then a lot of the stuff you're going to hear today is a lot of trial and error. I was just thinking earlier that I probably should do a whole other presentation, maybe not recorded, but all the things that I messed up on over the last 20 years, because I made a ton of mistakes, especially as I was moving into adulthood and decided that I still wanted to be a part of the program, but I didn't really know what it meant to be a mentor, to be a coach. I've learned a lot of things the hard way over the last 20 years, and so hopefully some of these lessons, especially some of the systems, you can help avoid some of. I should probably just give a separate presentation about all the ways that things went sideways over the last 20 years, and stepping on a bunch of rakes, pie in the face, foot in the mouth, all the different things you can imagine. I've done it all. So hopefully take these best practices and hopefully maybe shortcut some of the errors that I've made over the years. Speaking of work, this was a selfie I took a week ago. I actually flew direct here from Central Washington. I build robots that pick fruit, including apples. Dave and I worked on the apple project together, and I was just up in Central Washington operating a robot that picks apples, so having a good time there. All right, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk a little bit about the motivation, the why behind getting your team to the next level on student leadership. We're gonna look at Citrus as a little bit of a case study and look at the different eras, the evolution of the Citrus team and what we look like now versus where we started. We'll talk about some of the key principles of student leadership, like what works, like what are the core kind of foundations of the system, and we'll go right into what are Citrus's systems in place for student leadership development. We have a couple of key practices that may or may not work for your team. Like, take what you can from what we're doing. And then lastly, we'll talk about next steps that we can all think about going forward when we get to take this information back to our own teams. So, why invest in student leadership? We have for me, there's a couple of reasons why to invest in student leadership. The first is sustainability. Dave talked about this a little bit. For me, having competent student leaders means that they can carry more of the responsibility of operating a team. And the competent leaders on our team are inspiring the next generation of students. I'll talk a little more about this later, but having student leaders that are taking on responsibility is an inspiration to future students to do the exact same thing. And then from a coaching perspective, over the years, I've learned that student leaders that are actually really good at that job means it's less stuff that I have to do as a mentor on the team, and it means that I can either focus my energy at other areas, or I can just spend more time doing other things outside of FIRST. Having a little bit of extra free time is nice, and so I've seen that the more that student leaders are taking on the team, the more I can actually be a little bit more hands-off, spend more time at home with my wife and my dog. It's actually like it's a little bit of a hack to free up some time while still getting the results we're hoping for. Soft skills are one of the things that FRC does better than any other program that I've witnessed, as far as pulling out these collaborative skills that students are going to be able to take with them for the rest of their lives. The hard part about FIRST sometimes is, without the right structure, what I found is that students can often be kind of thrown into the fire on hard and soft skills, but most of the resources, most of the time they spend in the program is devoted to their hard skills. They're learning how to code, they're learning how to build, they're learning how to wire up robots. And so they end up picking up a lot of that stuff, which is great, but without a lot of structure, they're not getting rich soft skills. Maybe they're learning to talk to people just because they have to work with the programmer, so they're going to communicate with them at a baseline level. But without, especially mentors and coaches like yourselves, setting a framework, a structure for how the team operates and functions, they're not going to get those rich soft skills, those rich leadership skills. And so I found that the structure that we're going to go over in a little bit, it's helped especially some of our students that come in very technically talented, but maybe not great collaborators or communicators or leaders. It's helped mold their soft skills a lot more than maybe they would be encouraged to if they didn't have an experience like this in a program like this. I work with a lot of engineers, but I can tell you I know the engineers that haven't been forced into this collaborative experience at a younger age because they just don't have those soft skills built up in them over time. And I think that our graduation, or our FRC graduate profile coming out of the team, our students are showing really strong soft skills, giving them the ability to, down the road, if they'd like, manage a team, start a company, and they're going to have those skills that they wouldn't otherwise, just focusing on the technical side. And then another reason to invest in student leadership is overall product quality. This can be on the robot side, on your award side, on your business side. Good leaders bring out the best in their teams, and good student leaders are the ones that are going to bring the best out of the other students on the team. And they're able to manage projects better, and they're able to motivate their peers better than I could as a coach on the team. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Great. So let's talk about the broad stroke eras that Citrus has been over. If you know me, and Dave can attest to this, I'm a big Taylor Swift fan. And this is my wife and I at a Taylor Swift concert last year. And so one of the protocols for going to competitions is Taylor Swift is always playing in the team truck when we tow our equipment to competitions. And so we're going to break down a couple of eras of Citrus's development in terms of Taylor Swift albums. So our team was founded in 2005 by Steve Harvey, our founding mentor. I joined the team in 2008, and in our debut era, the self-titled Taylor Swift album, our team was very different from how it is today. And you may relate to a lot of this. You may have experienced this, or you probably know a lot of teams that fit a mold similar to this. We didn't meet at all in the off season. We were about 10 to 20 kids. It was basically myself and Steve and another alumni that came back to coach the team. Just the three of us mentoring. Steve was a very brave teacher at the time to allow me as a, 19-year-old to come in and help with the program. But the team really only took shape at kickoff. We would decide who our leads were at kickoff. We would decide who the sub-team leads were at kickoff. Basically did all the project management and assignments once we had the game and the kids were actually somewhat interested in what they were doing there. But for the most part, they were just there to hang out with their friends. And our outcomes were really mixed during this time period on the team. Sure, we had some kids that went off and did some pretty cool stuff, but a lot of students left the team after their senior year, not super motivated in anything, especially like not very STEM focused and motivated, but they just weren't that engaged during their time on the team. And so I wasn't really pleased with our outcomes during these years, and I felt like we could do better as a program. And so we started working at this a little bit more, and I'll go through that in our next era, which is our 1989 era. This is when Taylor Swift discovered pop, and this is when our team kind of discovered what we wanted to be about. We grew as a team. We had some success in 2011 that spurred the team on. But the bigger things that happened that really changed the trajectory of our team was meeting regularly in the off season. We went to our first off season competition, I think in 2012. Our training processes became more formalized. Our student leadership was established in the off season rather than figuring it out on kickoff. We picked leads earlier on. And then another element that I actually stole from Team 2996 in Colorado. I lived in Colorado for like 4 months, and I stopped by 2996 meetings while I was there. And they had these great student leadership meetings where it was a couple of the main mentors on the team and all the student leads. And they were talking about how they were going to run the team. And I thought, this is like the coolest thing ever. Citrus has to be doing this. And so we brought that technique over to Citrus. So having regular cadence meetings with the leadership group. And then on the mentor side, it was all still very loose. We had a couple more people hanging around, still had a bunch of like young gun alumni that were coming back and helping the team out, either helping or hurting depending on the alumni or depending on the situation. So it was all still very much in flux. All right, our next era is our reputation era. So the team started growing even more rapidly. I say 50 to 100. There were times where we'd get to the start of school and there'd be 130 kids in the room and I didn't know half their names. So the team was growing a lot in this time period. We started formalizing our off-season efforts. We started tracking trainings. The leads started to get more and more serious about preparing their sub-team members well. We started introducing our leadership nomination process, which I'll talk about a bit more. We actually started to grow our outreach projects and find, and kind of the gist of this era in our team was actually establishing our program both within the Davis community and the broader FRC community at large. This is really where we made our name as a team. And then that takes us to our current era, the Evermore era. Aptly named, and I really say that in the sense of I feel like our team in the last half decade or so has found a decent amount of steady state in our processes. All incoming students are interviewed in advance, so we run an interview process where every student that is interested in the team applies in May, gets interviewed in June, and then we publish a team roster in July. All leads, including outreach leadership positions, are nominated, interviewed, and selected in the off season. So we have this ongoing leadership selection process. And what that leads to is the average Citrus student over their tenure on the team is actually going through 3 to 5 unique interviews, both when you combine the application process and all the various leadership positions that the average student will interview for over the course of their time on the team. And we've also raised our coaching standards a lot. We've had the luxury to move beyond the open door, check it out if you're at all interested, which I think we were in that that mode for the majority of the time I've been on the team, but we finally got to the point where, you know what, we have a lot of our bases, maybe not all of our bases, but we have a lot of our bases covered from a coaching perspective. And if we're really going to entrust another adult to come into this space and have influence over students on our team, we want to make sure that they're well vetted, that they are a good fit for our culture. And so we have a kind of an interview process now for any interested coaches as well. We talk through the commitments, we talk through our standards, and we have onboarding involved. We require things like DEI training, things that aren't ultimately required for all coaches from First Side, but they are for our team. And I feel like that's helped up the notch of I think seriousness within our coaching staff, which I've really appreciated recently. Great, how are we doing? Oh, we're doing perfect. All right, so if we had time, I was gonna do a little discussion about this, but maybe just reflect on your own of what area your team might be in. And obviously, like, every team is different, so it might be a mix of these or something totally different. Give that some thought. Think about, you know, where are we on our growth path as a team? Because I think every team is somewhere on that continuum. Okay, let's talk about some of the key principles, kind of the core truths that I believe apply to every single team that are true. And this is really more about the nature of students and their experience and their capacity as leaders than it is about anything that we do on Citrus. Okay, the first truth that I believe is more is caught than is taught. The most impactful way to change students' perceptions about what they're capable of doing is by seeing other students do that thing. So watching students on Citrus excel is what makes new students on Citrus believe that they can excel. I could tell them till I'm blue in the face that, hey, trust me, for a decade plus now, we've had students that have built, you know, world championship caliber robots, and they'll be like, okay. But when they see that senior actually programming that auto, and then they watch it happen in a match and watch the level of play we're at, they actually begin to believe that I too am capable of doing that when I become a junior, when I become a senior. And then growing the expectation of what leadership is has also been critical to our team's leadership establishment within our student group. And so what I mean by that is I'm always challenging the students to take what they saw their leads do and just do it 10% better. That's all we're asking for. We're asking for, hey, you remember what it was like when you were trained as a freshman? What would you do differently to make the training just a little bit more effective, or make it sit a little bit more? Maybe you saw that you had a good time, but your buddy who also went through the training got a little bit lost in this area. How would you tweak things and grow things like that? And then the last thing, and we're going to talk about this a little more too, is finding ways to place your all-stars in strategic roles is really important, because again, that goes back to the catching, more is caught than taught. So this goes into, you get what you celebrate as a team. So our leadership process, which I'll go over in a bit, is very structured because it's actually, I wouldn't say it's important, it is mission critical to our team's success that we put the right students into leadership roles, and we honor those students' efforts with those leadership roles. Finding ways to elevate those students over students that may be popular within your program or talented, but don't have the necessary leadership qualities that you want to see elevated to those leadership positions is really important for our team. And I think this is where, I mean, every team runs themselves differently, but this is why for Citrus, things like voting and other things like that I see widely spread out throughout the program are not the kind of processes that are going to integrate into our successful methodology, because it doesn't guarantee that you're putting the students with the leadership qualities that you want to see other students capture in those positions of not just authority, but kind of like revelry, or I'm using the wrong word, but the important thing here is that you want to make sure that the leads are the kind of profile of student that you're hoping all of your younger students aim to be more like. And then lastly here is that doesn't, and the other flip side of avoiding making it a popularity contest, it means it opens the door to students of different temperaments that may be more quiet and less likely to be the one that's jumping into the spotlight, but you believe they are someone who merits the spotlight, and maybe they're less prone to doing so, but the team as a whole will benefit from elevating some of your quieter students that still meet or exceed your criteria for what you want in a leader. Okay, my third truth here is students can do a lot. I put a couple expletives in front of lot if this wasn't recorded, but the students on your team are capable of so much. I'm constantly amazed at what the students on Citrus are achieving year over year. And that happens through providing the right environment and structure for them. I talked about this earlier, but the students taking on more responsibility at a high level quality is helping out your teachers and your coaches, because there's less for you that you have to do. But the other side of that equation is it is a force multiplier for your team. The more your students are effectively owning tasks and doing things for your team, the more you're able to get done. Next technique for effective student leadership is failing your leads faster. So no student that joins the team is going to be truly ready for the role that they're stepping into. What we do on Citrus, and I think Coach Norm alluded to it in his fantastic keynote this morning, was we build a whole lot of robots, and the primary reason we build a ton of robots is because every single time we build a robot, it helps highlight where there are areas of improvement, especially for our leadership group. So building a robot in the off season or multiple robots on the off season can help you figure out, okay, you know what? Because we have different leaders every year, this year, our manufacturing lead, they're really good on the CNC, but they're really struggling with task delegation. Like there's the part list is piling up, and they're doing a really poor job at assigning parts to the various students on the manufacturing sub-team. So let me work with that student lead to say, hey, remember how the off-season went on this task? Like, let's work on techniques that are gonna help you delegate more effectively going into the real build season. And so that's where that product quality is constantly improving, because new generations of student leads have opportunities to fail at their roles as leaders before they get to the build season. And then that actually tees right into the last point is FRC team culture is generational. This is a good and a hard thing. So we get new students every 4 years in this program, and that is a superpower for your program as an FRC coach. I've been a part of a number of different organizations outside of FRC as well, and the institutional momentum that an organization has when all of the participating members have been there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and they like doing their same thing the same way every year. Like, it is so hard to move that boat. In a program like FIRST, you can change things in such a way that your alumni will come back 4 years later and barely recognize the team that they're walking into, because you can steer the ship much more nimbly within FRC. The flip side of that is your team culture can actually degrade fairly quickly, and that's where some of your processes become really important, because again, a couple of years of putting the wrong students into the wrong roles can actually set you back quite a ways when it comes to student motivation, contribution, team results, those sorts of things. So let's get into some processes. Okay, some Citrus Circuits methods that we implement within the program. Okay, so leadership selection. This process starts in May, basically right after Champs. Actually, I think the nomination form opens up a week or two before Champs. The nomination form is for anyone on the team to fill out, students, coaches, to nominate themselves or other students for any of the leadership positions on the team. And those leadership positions are both outreach lead roles, sub-team lead roles, which are like the main groups on the team, and then captain roles. We end up getting, gosh, I think between like 200 to 300 nominations submitted every year. A lot of those are obviously for duplicate students, but the cool part about the nomination process is just seeing all the amazing things that students write about each other. It's actually a really cool thing to reflect on when you read the form and you see the ways that certain juniors have made an impact on a freshman on the team, and they say like, hey, like I didn't know what I was doing when I joined the programming team, and so really showed me the basics and showed me how to use GitHub and things like that, and that made a really big difference in my time on the team. You get to read stories like that just reading through the students' thoughtful nominations, and coaches will nominate as well, especially when they see a little bit of a bigger picture on how the team is forming and the strengths and weaknesses of the various students. But regardless of who nominated who, even if the student was the only one to nominate themselves for the role, we'll reach out to all nominated students and see of the roles they're nominated for, which ones are you interested in? And then our captains for the current year will set an interview schedule, and we'll interview each of the students that are nominated and want to be considered for one or more roles. The interview panel is primarily just our core leadership group, which is the two captains, myself as the head coach, and then our lead mentor and our lead teacher. So 3 adults, 2 students make up the kind of the interview panel, and that kind of rotates out. Sometimes, you know, there's certain interviews that I don't necessarily have to be a part of, so I'll bow out, and it'll be 2 or 3 other people interviewing the student. And then technical coaches sometimes will come in for interviews if it's something they're particularly interested. We'll have one technical coach sit in on a certain round of interviews for one or more roles. And the core leadership is the group that will meet back after all the leadership interviews are done in May and set the leadership team for the upcoming season. Okay, so that takes us into our leadership handoff. So after leadership selections occur, each incoming leader is required to meet with the outgoing leader for a big information handoff. During that meeting, the outgoing leader's not just going to talk through some of the logistics stuff, make sure they have access to some of the generic role emails we have and other files and folder structures, but they're going to share some of their best practices, ways that they think the sub-team could improve for next year. And to ensure that this is happening, we have a job description written out for all of our leadership roles, and the students have to sign their job description along with their parents to say, yes, I'm agreeing to doing this for the next calendar year or for the next school year. But the other thing that they need is they need a signature from the outgoing lead that says, yes, I walk through all the information that we need for our leadership handoff during that meeting in May. So this effectively kind of closes the chapter for our outgoing leads and opens the chapter for next year's leads. Okay, and then we do a number of different leadership trainings over the course of the summer and fall. We have a couple of coaches that are, professionals. They've been, working in various fields, a lot of times not engineering, but other professional fields for, 15, 20, 30 years. And they'll give a number of leadership trainings, more around general like project management, communication practices, some of the other stuff that each of these leads are going to need to grow in if they're going to be effective in their new role that goes beyond the technical and gets into a lot of the soft skills we talked about earlier. Then the core and sub-team leads, basically that's the leadership group that meets weekly. The outreach leads kind of do their own things because each of their outreach projects their roles are based around their outreach projects, so it doesn't really make sense to have outreach leads meeting all the time together. But our core coaches and captains and sub-team leads do meet weekly. And we do kind of a leadership retreat to kick off the school year with those individuals. It's as much of a team builder as anything because these will be the main student influencers for the whole year, and so we try to start off on the right foot with that group and kind of build some cohesion. And then we talked earlier about the failing faster as one of our key principles. The on-the-job training is the last element to leadership training on Citrus. It very much is project-based, and you're going to learn what you need to learn because you need to learn it if we're going to do the thing. And so that's what all the off-season projects are for, is really that on-the-job training that's critical to shaking out any things that we need to improve on. Okay, I talked about leadership meetings. Those are held weekly. We do it every other week over Zoom in the summers. And it's funny, the leadership meetings are very much not technical meetings. The leadership meetings often revolve around like upcoming event logistics, behavior issues that are more general, not really specific to any one student, but if we're seeing trends within the team that we can address with those leaders who again are the core influencers within the team, we talk about those things there. There are some technical topics that are talked about, but it's mostly broad, like, hey, we need to get X, Y, and Z fully done by this date. Like, is everyone aware of that? Working backwards from that, what are the projects and tasks we need to spin up in order to meet our broader team goals and deadlines? And then the captains share like a summarized set of notes at every general meeting after a leadership meeting. So we have our full team meetings, and they start out with everyone coming together for a brief agenda. Part of that agenda is just reviewing the topics that were discussed at the previous leadership meeting, and the notes from all leadership meetings are posted to our Google Drive. I should mention another thing that often we talk about in these leadership meetings. Again, it's a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily technical. We talk a lot about like any incoming requests or new efforts that we want to do. So we'll have people ask if we want to participate in X, Y, or Z outreach event, or a student on our team will think about a new thing that we could be doing, and they'll come and present that idea to the leadership team for discussion. Great. Okay, so this is a little bit of a chart to kind of chew on, but I had it in my brain and I just had to get it out on paper. I'm calling this the Citrus Leadership Funnel, and I'm trying to visualize the typical progression and student makeup and breakdown across our team, across seasons. So bear with me because it's a lot of numbers, but I just want to kind of show what's going on, and hopefully this gives you a picture of more or less the formula with which we craft leaders on the team and their typical progression and experience. So I have this broken down on the x-axis is student age, so freshman through senior. We're only a 4-year team. We used to have 8th graders on the team, and then every Saturday meeting they'd start napping at around 3 p.m. because they were just not cut out for an 8-hour team meeting. And so eventually, especially when the team got too large, we said, okay, 9th through 12th is our limit. And then on the y-axis, as we work our way down, is kind of leadership responsibility level, basically. Like, what is the scope of their responsibility on the team, with general team members at the top, and then working our way down to our team captains, of which there are 2 each season. Okay, and then we have a lot of different paths that students take. So each of the orange bubbles represents how many students meet that criteria in any given season. So like I mentioned earlier, we only ever have 2 captains, and those captains are always seniors. So that's the 2 in the bottom right. But there's a broad distribution of leadership positions for our sophomores through juniors that you see, but there's freshmen are only coming in as team members, because none of our new members, which all 9th graders would be, none of our new members take on leadership roles. The first year is all about learning individual contribution, going through the trainings, things like that. And then we have our various progressions, and students are taking all sorts of paths. You can see even occasionally there are arrows going up, which means students are shaking off leadership responsibility as they go, which is fine. Sometimes students will try an outreach lead for 1 year and then not be interested in leading again their senior year, and that moves them back into the team member column. But a couple of the typical progressions we see are some students just aren't interested in taking on any leadership positions, or they're not a great fit for it. Maybe they don't have the necessary qualities to take on one of our roles, and they travel straight through the team member progression through however many years they're on the team. Oh, and I should mention too, you can also see generally the makeup of new team members. It's obviously heavy towards freshman and sophomore, but we always have a few juniors and seniors. We always have a couple of amazing, like I call them one-hit wonders, right? That come in their senior year, do an awesome job, but then they're out again. I'm like, I wish I had you 3 years ago. So we have a couple of those every year as well. And then our standard leader profile is a student who is on the team, maybe just their sophomore year, sometimes their freshman and sophomore year as a general team member, and then they'll move on to take a little bit of leadership responsibility with an outreach lead role. And our outreach leadership roles vary from running our fall workshop presentations at Capital City Classic, an off-season event, to running all of our RoboCamps, which facilitate 450 students and raises 6 figures for our team every year. There's a broad level of responsibility, but students generally will move from the most general path is moving to an outreach leadership role during their junior year, and then if they're technically minded and have developed some of that leadership experience in one of our outreach roles, they'll follow that second yellow arrow into a sub-team lead their senior year. Now this is just I'd say the most common path to sub-team leadership within the team. It certainly isn't the only one. Every one of those blue arrows indicates other paths that students are taking in their leadership arc within the team. And then we always have like an all-in sort of kid who not just has the bug, but also is a great communicator, a pleasure to work with. Students love working with this student, and that's that green arrow, that kind of like all-in. They are accelerating quickly, jumping into outreach their sophomore year, jumping into a sub-team leader role, and then they're kind of queued up to be a captain on the team. Those are kind of 3 of the progressions, but students are, as you can see, students are all over the map on here, but it does end up forming kind of a funnel, which is why I had to get it into a visual, because it was going to drive me crazy if I wasn't able to map out what our students look like on the team in a given year. And everyone's obviously going to have a different map, but I think if you were to take the time to look at how your students evolve on the team, you'd probably see something funnel-like. And so the reason for, in my view, the reason for the funnel is because the funnel is the opportunity to grow your students intentionally such that you get to the point where you have 2, or ideally you have more than 2 candidates that would be excellent captains for your team. And the captain role is that key guiding role that you are elevating the most on your team. You want students to be the most like, and it's important that you're building up students to that point to take on that role their senior year. Okay, so we've talked through some of the citrus methods. Let's get into some next steps that we can all take back with us. Okay, I think the first step is just some self-reflection and consider your current leadership structure in your own team. And these are a couple questions you can ask yourself. And these are very open-ended, and there's not going to be a right answer to any of these. But I think it's important that we all are reflecting on this at least once a year to evaluate how your team is progressing in your own journey of establishing yourself as a STEM delivery program in your area. We talked about this before in what you celebrate, but what signals are you sending to your team about what it means to be a leader? And these signals can be from other coaches or yourself. Like, how do you project what leadership looks like? But also in your student leads, what are they communicating about what it means to be a leader? Are your student leaders professional, or are they just popular within your program? Are they actually the kind of people that you want to be in management at a company, or are they just the cool kid inside your classroom? Are your mentors and coaches backstops for your program, or are they the bosses of your program? On Citrus, Coach Norm was using the analogy earlier with us of bumpers. Our coaches on Citrus are the bumpers of the program, making sure that we're, on the bowling alley, we're always headed down towards the pins. It may be a bumpy road, and depending on the quality of student leadership, we may be doing a lot of bouncing back and forth, but the coaches are there to ensure that we get there, right? Versus the coaches are the ones throwing the ball and rolling down to the pins and hitting them themselves. On Citrus, this is like, 1, I just don't have the energy or the time to actually pull off what we pull off. I can never take that work on. But 2, I find it really rewarding to see what the students are able to do. And so I prefer to view us as bumpers on the team as far as our coaching strategy goes. And then this kind of goes in with other points, but the tenor of how your students view their role in leadership is really important. And this is a tricky one for our students as well, because a lot of times they can get wrapped up in, oh man, I really want to have a leadership role. I really want to have a leadership role. And there's been students that have had it as something they've obsessed over, but they haven't gotten the role because they didn't have the other qualities that it took to be a leader. They just wanted to be a leader. And so that it's for us, it's not about the title, it's about taking on the job description that they sign and being 100% in on that role. And so this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, and it's why the nomination process, in my view, is so critical to what we do on Citrus, because it pushes and it elevates students that maybe wouldn't elevate themselves on their own, to say, hey, you can actually do this. You have what it takes. You have the passion. You have the attitude to be a lead on Citrus. Let's elevate you into that role, rather than students that are just hunting for something else to put on their college resume, which is often the UC Davis is Davis is a college town. A lot of our students are very college obsessed, and so we do everything to try to pull students off the ledge on the college obsession side of things and focus more on kind of the practical skills that they're growing in the program. And so yeah, we're always trying to sniff out what students are there just for the title and what students are there to really give back and make the team better than they left it, or leave the team better than they found it, is what I meant. Second next step is be patient. The culture that I've been discussing here on 1678 took a really long time, over a decade to develop. Here's you know what? Actually, going back really quick, that's Sam Sands over there in the corner. Look at Sam, doing a great job leading. Yeah. Sam and Janet, an excellent combo. Both mechanical design students did a great job their year leading. Be patient. This is a picture from our team party in 2014 or 13, I want to say. And this is back when we could have a team party and everyone would fit around the pool, and it was just it was all very homey back then. But where we are now, it took a really long time. And I mentioned that this FRC culture is generational, and that's a huge strength. But the flip side of that is it's going to take time to steer the ship. If you're looking to turn your team around, that will take often a generation plus to fully kind of reset the culture and move it in a direction that you're hoping it can move into. And then the other encouragement here is the structure, the environment is what you need to focus on. Focus less on the timetable and more on the structure and the expectations that you're building, and let the results of the student growth come with time as you set those structures and those processes in place. And that kind of goes into the last thing, focus on progress. Before I get into the topic, because I'm going to forget the pictures otherwise. Apparently I didn't talk about any of the other pictures. But this is Avery and Josh, two of our seniors from 2017. They were both mechanical design leads in their time on the team, and they are both now full-time engineers for me at AFT that I get to work with every day. They're great kids, and it's fun to see. This is an off-season robot that they were built, and I talked about the fail during the off-season earlier. This is probably the worst off-season robot we've ever had. We were trying a whole lot of new stuff. Almost none of it worked, but they're so proud of what they built, and I learned a lot about where their weaknesses were during that process, and we improved on those before the 2017 season took place. And that goes right back into giving your leaders opportunities to lead, discovering their strengths and weaknesses. Every student's going to be different. Every student's going to be somewhere on this continuum of strong soft skills and strong hard skills. Students lie all over the map there, and you're going to have students filling the same role one year to the next, but with wildly different sets of strengths. And you, as a mentor, as a coach, need to elucidate that spectrum early, and then you need to tailor your approach to developing that student based off of where they are along that continuum. And the brute force way is just practice, and it can be as simple as just find ways to build more robots. It doesn't really matter what program, where it is. If we're a robot building competition, if the main focal point, like kind of the culmination of your season, is this build season and competition season, if that's where it's all going, find ways to give them opportunities to build robots earlier than January. It's probably the number one practical thing I could say that's really transformed the way our student leads develop and solidify, and it's helped ensure a continuity of success year over year that we wouldn't have really any other way. Great, so I think I effectively saved us a little bit of time for a couple of questions. If folks have questions, I'd love to take them. Oh, we're gonna do mics. Oh, nice, awesome. So I guess raise your hand, and Nick has a mic here, and he can give it to.
Where to go?
Oh yeah, right over there. Yep, in the middle. Awesome. And then, yeah, raise your hand while the question's happening, I guess, so we can bounce around. Go for it.
Hey, how do you handle giving student feedback, and what do you do when a student is not doing the job?
It's a great, oh man, so tough. It's going to depend on the student. I think where we found success is sit-down meetings during general team meetings. I think giving good feedback requires, well, I'd say things not to do is be unclear about your expectations of what your leaders are supposed to do. So I'd say a lot of the work actually happens well in advance of having those conversations and having really, like, that's why the job descriptions that we have students sign and their parents sign are critical, because it lists off the things that we're expecting them to do on a high level. And if they're not executing on one or more of those job responsibilities, we can point right back to the document and say, hey, it's really important as a lead that you're fulfilling your commitment to the role, and it includes these things. So we try to keep it to some basic elements like that. And then sometimes it gets more into behavioral stuff, and that's a whole other story, but generally not with leads. The leads are very, in general, like they'll take the feedback okay as long as you're couching it in the right method. But have expectations set in advance is going to make those conversations a lot easier. Yeah.
I know you said a lot of your students, start at 9th grade, and that's your focuses, but do you find a lot of the student leaders were either an FLL or FTC prior to your program?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we have a Davis Youth Robotics program. We run VexIQ mostly, but yeah, about 50% of our income, actually now it might be closer to 60% of our incoming students were in our progression of programs leading up to high school. But I don't think there's a strong correlation between the leadership, and I think it's with or without robotics experience before high school, I think we have a good mix of leads that did or did not participate. We have some kids who come in and they're like, I saw Citrus when I was in kindergarten, and I've been looking forward to being on the team for the last 8 years. That happens too. We just had a kid that joined the team like that. But yeah, I don't see a strong correlation between pre-high school robotics experience and whether or not they take a leadership role. Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned that you interview all the incoming students. Are there students that you don't accept for some reason, or what's the purpose of that interview?
Yeah, so we do interview all students that are interested in applying to the team, and we have about 70 students that will apply, and we're able to accept about 40 or 45. And that comes down to program capacity. We just don't have the room to support a 200 student team. We don't have the coaches, the student leadership bandwidth, and so our limit is around 110 for our team. And so, yeah, the good thing about where we're at as a program is we've also built up high school classes that happen during the daytime that are built around smaller robotics programs. So students that aren't accepted onto the team still have that as an opportunity. And then we also encourage students to reapply too. Sometimes a student will be applying as a 9th grader and they either haven't really decided where they want to put their focus yet. Maybe they're doing 4 different other activities and they clearly don't have the time to commit to the program. But maybe in future years they're like, hey, I tried those other things out. I really want to make Citrus my focus in high school. And so we will regularly give students a second look in future years. But it really just depends on the student. But we just don't have the bandwidth to support every single student in the community. Yeah. Yeah, we got one there and then a little ahead. Yeah.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier about how you go about getting rid of student popularity contests between each other, but how would you go about handling students that are only popular with mentors, but they don't exactly show leadership qualities, but they get those leadership positions because the mentors like them, or they might be the related to certain mentors, things like that.
Great, yeah, tricky things, and things that have happened on Citrus too. I'd say a couple of things are. One, I mentioned that the leadership selection group is a combination of the outgoing student captains and the core leads. And so I think that actually having the student captains in the room for all those conversations is a good kind of reality check in a lot of ways, because us as adults only have one piece of the picture, and the student captains often have their ear closer to the ground when it comes to reading some of the vibes within the team, and they bring a really good perspective to that process. I'd say we haven't done a perfect job at that over the years, and obviously we've made mistakes in leadership selections, and thankfully it's a 1-year turnover process for leads, so you just kind of got to grin and bear it most of the time if you pick someone who maybe not optimal. But yeah, I think having multiple representatives from students and coaches in that selection process has helped kind of level some of those things out. Yeah. Yeah.
So all I have to say is, wow, 6 figures funding, hundreds of kids that want to apply, that all can get in because you don't have capacity. And not really that long in terms of time to grow from when you were much smaller and more of a fledgling team in I'll use the word mature, but maybe successful full is better. So what I'm wondering about, so we're in the early stage, we're just year number 5 right now. How did you get such great community support, school support, student support, or interest, and how much marketing, brand reputation, social media, press, stuff like in order to get the community to kind of adopt the mission of what the team's doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me go back a couple of slides to a picture I didn't talk about, but I think it helps to talk about this era of the team, because I think this is maybe some of the questions you're having relate to what happened around this time in the program. And right in the middle there, you see Steve kneeling in the front with Helena, our 2013 captain, and then Jasmine, who would become the next season our 2014 team captain. Both very different students. Helena very outgoing and charismatic, and then Jasmine much more reserved and analytical, but both amazing captains during that time period in our team history. And often, more than anything else, and this is why I really believe in this student leadership topic, is because we lucked out to get students like this. Like, these were incredible students that more or less fell into our lap. We didn't deserve them. We had no feeder program. Like, they just decided, basically on a whim and a recommendation from a teacher, that they should join robotics, and they hopped in, and they were all in when they joined. And our team benefited immensely from the leadership that they brought during this kind of pivotal era in our team's growth. So I think to your question more broadly, like, students like these were the ones that motivated their peers to care more about just hanging around with their friends, but actually care about leaving the team in a better spot than they found it. And our team grew by leaps and bounds year over year because of that leadership example. So I point a lot of times to this era of the team as being the kind of our time where we lucked into some amazing leads. Actually, Alejandro, the lead before our 2012 lead, was the same way. Just an incredible communicator, dynamic, and totally changed the culture around from what our team had looked like through 2011. So, yeah, a lot of luck, but also selecting the right students, even if we got lucky in doing it, made a big difference. Yeah, microphone over there. Yeah. And I think we have time for maybe 2 more. Yeah.
You said to select students' leadership in May, which makes sense because you have all the summer. But what happens, or do you ever see students who overestimated their availability from their fall academic load and are unable to meet the commitment that they thought they were going to make, and how do you handle it?
Great question. I'd say we haven't, at least not in recent memory, had an overcommitment issue with our sub-team leads. Maybe more so with the outreach leads, and I think that that this kind of goes back to mentors being a backstop in a lot of ways. Especially because the outreach leadership roles are essentially, like we saw in the funnel, a lot of the students that move into sub-team leadership and eventually like captaincy, they start their leadership career at Citrus in an outreach role. And so that is a little bit more of a sink or swim, and we kind of roll the dice a little bit more on students to take on some of those positions, and it doesn't always work out, as you alluded to. And sometimes it can be academic, sometimes for work ethic reasons or other things, they just don't gel with the role, and we get some mixed results there. And so having good coach backup to prompt students more and hold their hand through the process more than we would like to. I think basically coach attention is one of the ways that we address that. We have had, we had one time in the last 3 years I can recall where a student was fully removed from a role. But that student basically dropped off the team pretty quickly, and it wasn't working out. But yeah, for the most part, I think coach support is our backup to when students overcommit or aren't able to fulfill their duties properly. Yeah, I think we got time for one more question. Yeah.
Can I take the question?
Yeah, I don't see a hand, so it's you.
Yeah. So as a team who's building our student leadership structure and kind of like going down that path, maybe in our 1989 era now, you talked a little bit about students that may not be particularly outgoing, or they're a little more reserved. What are some of the like not so obvious personality traits or habits that those students might have that you think make them a really good contributor to the team, or who might be a good leadership? Just like, what are the not so obvious things that you might look for in a good student leader?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say a couple of things to look for are if you have a non-leader, like maybe a junior or sophomore on your team that's doing a really good job working one-on-one with a freshman on like building a skill or working on a project together, that's a good clue that they might be a good lead when they get to be a little bit older. Prompt written communication. Sometimes students are really soft-spoken, but their written communication is just incredible. We had a student lead on the team recently that was worked with their parents. They were clearly on the spectrum, but came out of their shell over their first year on the team, stepped into leadership their sophomore year, and has just progressed more and more as an incredible communicator and leader, despite some challenges on the education side, and that was only possible because we're able to recognize multiple paths towards leadership and valuing strengths outside of just being up front on stage sort of thing. So yeah, I think look for the small clues, look for the compassion, look for the caring, the coaching, the hours spent in the shop. That's another really clear indicator. Just raw effort can overcome a lot of other things when it comes to being an effective contributing member of the team. So good question. Great. Well, thank you so much for the time, everybody. Appreciate it. And if you ever want to get a hold of me, my email is here. You can connect with me on social media. But yeah, if we haven't met yet, please say hi later, and thank you so much.
All right, thanks so much, Mike. So we'll take a brief pause for 5 minutes or so, and then roll into our next set of presentations. Just one more round of applause for Mike coming out from California. Thanks so much.
I want to let the record show your question took me over by 2 minutes. That's fine.